Welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host, Kevin. This week we're going to be talking about the 1980 classic science fiction film, Flash Gordon, starring a bizarre cast of characters, to say the least. If this is your first time joining us, the B Movie Club is kind of like a book club, where in the beginning of the week I will tell you what movie we're going to be discussing, and you can watch it, send in your comments, your questions, and we'll discuss it on the show. You can reach me through Twitter at KD9575. You can also post your questions and comments on my Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. Typically what I do is I try to pick movies that are a little off the beaten path, maybe movies we haven't talked about lately or anybody's talked about lately. I kind of walk a fine line between picking things that are super popular, so they're not really B movies, versus picking things that are too obscure that people wouldn't care to know about or watch a video about. So sometimes I kind of drift. I guess what it comes down to is I'd rather cheat on the side of a little too popular, like I did There's Something About Mary a few weeks ago, which people said, this isn't a B movie. It's not a B movie. It was a big hit when it came out. And, it came out like 15 years ago. It wasn't like 100 years ago. So people still talk about that to some degree. Rather than picking some bizarro thing that was straight to video that half the people have no idea about. Although sometimes I do try to, forge new trails that way as well. If there's something that I remember seeing as a child that I really enjoyed that maybe not everybody is aware of, I'll still do those from time to time as well. But anywho, this is the B Movie Club. This week it is Flash Gordon. Basically the plot is Flash Gordon is a quarterback for the New York Jets, and he and a female companion named Dale, who were basically strangers, were on a plane that crashed. And it crashed because an evil menace from another planet was causing earthquakes and meteor showers and volcanic eruptions to occur on Earth. So they crashed, and coincidentally, near the laboratory of Dr. Hans Zarkov, who's kind of a renowned scientist who has been shunned lately because of his bizarre theories on the extraterrestrial presence that's attacking the Earth, essentially. So they come across him. He kidnaps them, puts them on a rocket, and they go out into outer space to try to find out what's going on. And they make their way to Mongo. Yeah, that planet Mongo. And find the evil Emperor Ming the Merciless and all of his bizarre alien characters. So over the course of the movie, Flash is, sentenced to death. He escapes. He recruits allies. He overthrows Ming the Merciless. Oops, spoiler alert, he overthrows the bad guy at the end of the movie. And then it's like kind of leaves the ending open as to there might be sequels. Because it's like, is Ming dead? Is he still around? How are they ever going to get back home? These are important questions we don't have the answers to. When they made this movie, they actually started talking about it in the late 70s. They were taking the famous comic strip Flash Gordon and wanting to reinvent it. Because in the original comic strip, Flash was like, he was like a polo player, something very appropriate for like the late 20s, but not so appropriate for the late 70s. So they wanted to update it, kind of make it new. Now the plot is very, very similar to the original comic strip. everything that occurs is very similar. The same characters, the same plot points, very, very similar. Interestingly enough, George Lucas wanted to do Flash Gordon around that same time, but somebody else had already had the rights. So at that point, he went on to write Star Wars. So interesting little sidebar there. This movie, not a big hit. In fact, I'd probably go the other way. Like I said, they left the ending open to spawn sequels, but because it wasn't a big hit, kind of went out the window. In fact, there was some issue with the actor who played Flash Gordon. His name was Sam J. Jones, who was kind of an unknown. His biggest thing was that he was like in Playgirl magazine or something up to that point. And he was arguing he wasn't paid or wasn't paying enough or on time, so he basically quit right after principal filming had completed. They needed him to come back and kind of reloop the sound, which is essentially like, we need you to go back into the studio and just record your voice over some scenes, and he refused to do it. So they had to find some other actor who goes uncredited, and he had to basically reloop the entire movie. So the voice you hear is not that actor's, it's some other random guy. So there you have it. Arnold Schwarzenegger was also offered, or not offered, but he was thought about playing the role of Flash Gordon, but his accent at the time was considered too unintelligible to give him that role. So we'd have to wait a few more years till Conan the Barbarian, I guess. I was laughing because the cast is really kind of strange. You've got Max von Sydow, who's in a few things at the time. I mean, he was big like in the 80s. He was in Dreamscape, which I did a few weeks ago. He was in other things. You had Topol, who was Fiddler on the Roof, playing Hans Zarkov. I mean, he's famous for Fiddler on the Roof. Why is he doing Flash Gordon, for goodness sake? Timothy Dalton would go on to play James Bond. He was in it. He played Prince Baron from the planet Arborea. Yeah, exactly. And the two main actors, like I said, Sam J. Jones was basically an unknown. And the female actress, her name was like Melody Anderson, did like 5 movies in the 80s, and that was about it for her. So it didn't necessarily have the name recognition. It's like it did, but it didn't. It's very strange. One of the more famous parts of this movie is the soundtrack. Flash, yeah. The entire soundtrack was done by Queen, which at the time was kind of new and interesting to do, to have like a contemporary rock band do all the soundtrack. And after this, a lot of other movies kind of copied that. I was joking that the costumes were also designed by Freddie Mercury. I'm not sure that's true or not, but it definitely looks that way. Very, very strange. A lot of gold, a lot of bright reds, and just kind of odd. Whereas you watch a movie like Star Wars, and the costumes seem kind of a little more realistic. These were all like leotards and unitards and crazy bangles, and I can't explain it. The alien races that they meet, some of them looked very human, and some looked like, rejects from Neverending Story. Those weird kind of like creatures that walk around. It's just like, okay. Anywho, good times. The sets, again, I'm comparing it to Star Wars, because Star Wars, while not realistic per se, at least kind of looks like, you look up at the stars, you see, look up at the sky, you see stars, you see planets. It looks very realistic. In Flash, whatever they showed, like the sky, it looked like, I don't know, like pudding or something. Some kind of rancid jello was thrown up in the sky. It was very, very strange. It almost looked like an art project sometimes. It's like everything was very cartoony. It kind of limited the impact of the realism of Flash Gordon, I guess. I was watching it a few nights ago with my wife, and she was kind of reading a book as she looked up. And I turned it on, and there were scenes in it where it was so hokey. She thought I was watching like Cinemax or something. It was it was like Cinemax After Dark, because it was like scenes with Flash with his shirt off, wearing like a Speedo, running around. I'm just like, okay, come on. Goodness gracious. Overall, it's fun. It's hokey. Soundtrack is enjoyable. I recommend it. It was an 82% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which, as you know, that means it's pretty good. Again, don't go into it expecting, fine filmmaking, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. So, next week, we will be doing... I put up on Facebook, I asked the question, because usually I do, like, horror, action, science fiction, comedy. So it was time to do comedy. And I got a lot of good suggestions from Facebook and Twitter as to, possible comedies I could do next week. I had people suggest Real Genius, Porky's, Weekend at Bernie's, Strange Brew. All good choices. I added them to my Netflix queue. Typically what I try to do is pick movies that are going to be streaming instantly. So anybody who has access to Netflix can just turn on their Xbox or their computer or whatever and watch it and not have to rush out or, wait by the mailbox to get it. So this week I decided I'm going to do the black comedy from the late 80s, Heathers, starring Christian Slater. And, one of my old-time favorites. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It is streaming instantly on Netflix. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote from my movie Flash Gordon. And here it is. Dispatch Warlock at Ajax to bring back his body. So there you go. Good times. Yeah. Half the people had English accents, half of them had Italian accents. Who knows? I don't know how they roll up in Mongo, but that's how they do it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us. So next week I'm doing Heathers. Thank you for subscribing. Tell a friend, and be well.